I had a lot going on last week. I had multiple shows, studio visits, appointments, deadlines, logistics. Ah! So I decided to go for a nice, relaxing hike along the Mohawk to settle my mind. But less than 5 minutes into the hike, I saw it. The dam along the Mohawk. Every now and then, it just pumps all the water out of the wetlands. It's actually more serious than that. The dam, it just causes a lot of water fluctuations, like all dams do. It just causes a lot of trouble in an ecosystem. The dams raise and lower the water levels precipitously, not in any way that makes sense for wildlife that has evolved to follow floodplains, like carp do, like a lot of wetland wildlife. Like a lot of beings who live in wetlands, carp normally have no problem with rising and falling water levels because they're just adapted to it. In fact, they prefer to mate in the floodplains. That's what makes the precipitous rising and falling of water around the dam on the Mohawk so deadly to so many innocent little beings. It doesn't make any sense from the perspective of the fish and the frogs and the tadpoles and everybody. Normally, the water fluctuates slowly, and they can gauge, okay, we're down to this level. Guess we should make our way back out to the deeper water now. But when the dam just suddenly pumps it dry, there's no time to get out, and so they get trapped. And I see this a lot out here. Whole families of great big carp, all huddled together at the end of the line. So much suffering visible there, written in the dry dirt and the scavenged bones. It's always the carp that I see, too, because they're the big ones. The herons, they grab up all the little pollywogs and small fish and whatnot. And everything else dies right off before it's even really apparent that something terrible is happening out there. The carp, though, they have an amazing ability to live in anoxic conditions. They can survive in mud longer than anyone else. So it's usually them that I see out there when this happens. This is what this swamp looked like just a week before. It was just full of life. And then just somebody pulls a lever somewhere and then this. It's so painful to see that I thought a lot about what to do if I ever got here in time to save them. I figured it would be muddy and hard, and I had no idea what I might do. But I decided I would need plastic bags to carry the fish. Big ones. So I've been walking around for months with garbage bags in my backpack for just in case. And now here I am, looking out at a drained wetland, with only the smallest patch of drying mud way out in the middle, with the dorsal fins of carp flailing around in the mud. Fuck. I don't know if you can see in this image the giant fish sitting there, just kind of stuck in the mud in front of that great big old heron. But that's there were dozens of them. And I still have nightmares about all the tiny little fish that were leaping and leaping and leaping above the water. They do that because they're running out of oxygen. They were suffocating. And I could not get all those little fish. That's what the heron were doing there. But even a great big old heron can't eat a carp. They're huge. It just didn't seem right to leave them there to just suffocate like that. So this is what I did. And I know a lot of y'all are going to be having some feels to share with me in the comments about how carp are allegedly not worthy of our moral regard because they are what humans have labeled invasive species. And yeah, it's true that a lot of carp were, in fact, introduced to this country by the U.S. government One of the reasons why carp were originally stocked in this country was that European settlers were overfishing every single habitat they entered. Not only were the waters being overfished, but all the human waste that was being suddenly dumped into pristine habitats was wiping out native fish. Native fish were just disappearing, and they were already gone by the 1800s. So thousands of people every year were requesting carp from the U.S. government. So the U.S. government started breeding them. Most fish can't live in water that's just saturated with human waste. Carp, it turns out, can. They are hardy survivors who can live anywhere. And that's why everyone's shitting on them now, literally. It's not their fault that they're a very adaptive fish. And I mean, this wasn't the only time carp were introduced either. I mean, they were introduced as recently as this past year in an effort to clean up waterways, which they're good at. But then we lose our minds over them. So we have people introducing the carp, and then we have the same people later going to war with them.
Carp are gonna kill everyone's jobs and cost the whole economy. American jobs and the economy and shit.
You're being hysterical. And that's on you. That's not on the carp. It's not their fault that they can survive in human waste. That's not their problem. That is one of their benefits. The problem is that other fish can't. And that's on you. So humans are rightfully concerned about the disappearance of a lot of fish. But it's not non-native species that are making them disappear. It's not the out-competition from other species. It's the out-competition from our own species. Humans are destroying fish habitat all over the earth. Fish are dying everywhere because they're being overfished and their habitats are being destroyed. And that's what you got to fix. If you want more so-called native fish, that's what you've got to fix. You can leave the carp alone because an ecosystem will rebalance itself once you get humans out of the equation. It's just so easy to point fingers at other species and to propose killing non-human beings to solve problems. And I really do want to spend a lot of time on the science around this concept of non-native and invasive species. That is something that you're probably wrong about. Almost everyone is wrong about this right now. It's just taking the science decades and decades and decades to get out to the general population and even to a lot of scientists. There are still a lot of scientists who still believe this ridiculous mythology that animals somehow miraculously have nationalities that need to be lethally enforced. And a lot of animals have unnecessarily died. They get killed all the time for this. Right now in the Pacific Northwest, they're thinking about killing hundreds of thousands of owls over this stupid philosophy. I had a really long rant to go in this video right here, but I'm going to save that. I'm going to try to make it not a rant, and I'm going to science it up and have it as its own video because it's worth it. There's a lot of science to debunk this idea that animals are invasive and non-native and that the words non-native mean anything in this world. I mean, the earth is not a museum and we are not its curators. But we still have all this idiotic hubris in that regard. And there's going to be a whole video about that at some point, I'm sure. All right, that's another video. I don't want to get in the weeds right here. We'll argue that out in another video. Because I do have a video on this subject planned for a later time. But that's not what this one is about. I just want you to connect for a moment with the fact that these are sentient beings who were suffering. They were suffocating. And they were desperately seeking mercy. And there's so little mercy in the world, and I have prayed for so long for more mercy and compassion in this world that when I am offered the opportunity to be the instrument of mercy, then I'm going to take it. I have to take it. I have to step up. So yeah, that's what I did here. Rant concluded. Look for that other video another time. All right, back to the carp. So I had to figure out a way to save these fish. The first thing that I discovered is that my little hiking shoes were no match for that level of swamp mud. The second thing I discovered is that I'm still terrified of quicksand. Yeah, I used to think quicksand was something that only happens in cartoons and old Tarzan movies too. But then one day I stepped in some out in Nevada, and it's real, and it's terrifying, and it's unexpected. So yeah, I've had some quicksand PTSD since then, and sinking into the Mohawk River swamp mud reignited this. So I spent hours gathering brush trying to make a causeway out to the fish so I wouldn't sink into the mud. I worked all day on this and barely got a tenth of the way out. Fuck it, man. I finally just decided to lump it and try to rescue these fish. That's when I discovered the third thing. The third thing I discovered is that a 30-gallon kitchen trash bag is no match for a 65-pound carp. That first day, after all that work, the best I could do was get one fish back out to the water. In order to do it, I wound up having to get it into a pup tent and dragged it across acres and acres of swamp and phragmites in hot temperatures. I swear to God, I thought the effort might kill us both. Honestly, I did. I thought I was going to be found lying out there in the 9-foot-tall phragmites, like 20 yards from the Mohawk. But I did get that one fish out. I'm still worried about that one because it was kind of beat up and stuff by the time I got it to the water. By the time I got it out there, it was starting to get dark, and I realized I needed different gear and a better plan. I worried all night about the mud drying and about me not being equal to the task. I thought all night about what I could use. I worried and worried about not getting all the fish. I wondered how many there were and how I would ever do this. The next day, I got up at 4 a.m. and went back out. This time, I borrowed chest waders from a friend. Thank you, Fred. And I brought giant, heavy-duty construction waste bags from the hardware store. By now, the muddy hole had dried so much that my little causeway was not even close to it. So, fuck it. I began just slogging through the deep mud. I was pretty scared of sinking, but it had to be done. I had to walk through about a quarter mile of deep mud, slowly making my way out to the fish. Getting stabbed and poked by reeds growing in the ground, I was so scared of the ubiquitous northern water snakes, because they're everywhere up there, and they bite and bite and bite, and they inject you with an anticoagulant, so you'll bleed for days. I was even scared of the snappers, but, sometimes you gotta do what you gotta do. So I would wade out to the little mud hole where the fish were, and then I had to catch a giant fish into the big bag with enough water to keep it safe till I could get it to the deep water. Then I had to carry this 65-pound fish and its 20 or 30 pounds of water across the same quarter mile of swamp all the way back to the road. When I got there, I had to climb up onto the bank with the fish and the water to the road. Then I had to walk another quarter mile or so down a gravel road wearing big, bulky, hot chest waders and carrying 90 pounds or so of water and fish. It was about 90 degrees, and I had not eaten since the day before yesterday. I had to keep stopping about every 30 steps or so. My God, it was exhausting. This was some of the most physically challenging work I've ever done in my life. Then I would get to release the fish into the water, my favorite part. I'd sit and I'd watch it swim away. Usually they'd sit for a moment and get their bearings, and it was just a joy to watch them, figuring out that they were going to get to live after all. Then I would collapse onto the bank to rest a minute, and then it was back for the next fish. I worked all day and only got 5 more fish out. It was like all I could do. I was pushing myself to the breaking point. I kept thinking there's only about a half dozen more, but I was wrong about that almost every time I thought it. Eventually, I just couldn't do it even one more time. I looked out at the drying swamp and hoped it could last another day. That night, I kept thinking that I just could not go back there again. It was so hard and so muddy and so gross. There was literally an eyeball plucked by a heron from one of the carcasses floating in the mud with us the whole time I was trying to drag those fish out. There was an unhealthy smell, and there were so many fish. I kept splashing myself in the face with swamp mud. Then for days I would think about all the kinds of waterborne illnesses and how long would it take to find out whether I had been exposed. I thought a lot about Naegleria fowleri, because that was some warm mud, I'll tell you. I was supposed to be getting ready for a show in 2 days, but I had to save the fish. I just couldn't stand the thought of them suffering. And yet, I felt psychologically paralyzed by the impossibility of this task. The next day, I thought very hard about not going. And then I went anyway. And I spent all day long again pulling carp from the mud to take them to the water. On this third day of Operation Swamp Witch, I managed to drag 18 more fish out of the mud. I got every last one I could find out to sanctuary. Yay! Altogether, that's 24, 24 living beings who found mercy and got back to the cool green water of the Mohawk. It was fucking beautiful. It was the most physically exhausting, stressful work I think I've ever done. But it was so worth it to the fish and to me. After all of that, I was still so tired and stressed out about the upcoming shows and about everything that had just happened. I don't know what I was thinking, but I guess I kind of wanted to commiserate with someone about it all. You know, like it was kind of a big deal to me, and maybe I even wanted some kind of pat on the back for it. Like, good job. Boy, I bet that was hard. It feels dumb to have wanted that. But you know, I'm human, and it was such a difficult and exhausting adventure. I guess I kind of wanted some kind of happy recognition of everything I'd just gone through. So I told a friend about it the next morning as we were walking to the community garden together. I mean, she'd kind of known I'd been out there, and that I was trying to rescue all these fish, but I hadn't told her the whole story until now. She hadn't offered to help or anything, but I'm used to people not really caring about the non-humans, or even the humans when you get down to it. So I hadn't really expected any help, but I still didn't expect this.
Too bad we couldn't have eaten them.
After all that, oh yeah, she dug in after that too.
Too bad we couldn't have just eaten them.
Sometimes a thing hits me just right, and I just know. I'm some kind of alien in this world. Or maybe they are. I don't know. But either way, I'm constantly reminded that I just can't relate with most of the other humans.